Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Carlos Munez. Looking forward to this conversation, Carlos. Really looking forward to it, my friend.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And yes, we've got another Brit on the show.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Northerner.
Another Northerner as well. Yeah, we've had a bit of a spell of Northerners. But you weren't born in the UK, right?
No, I wasn't. I was born on the other side of the world.
Yeah. And what we're going to be talking about today is Carlos has come up with this theme of triggers, and we're looking at triggers in from two perspectives. So, what triggered you to start your search, and so that's at one level, and then at second level, in terms of what triggers our response and our feelings, those emotional kind of triggers. So looking at it from a trigger from a different perspective. So yeah, you were born on the other side of the planet, and so why did you start your search, Carlos?
So I was born in Peru, in Lima, 1992, so a while ago now. And at that time, the country obviously was in a civil war. So I understand a lot of the reasons and the whys of that. And yeah, I was raised with a very happy childhood, shall we say. Triggers was not something that I really ever associated with in my childhood until getting to later in my life, or more recent years, of having my own child, my firstborn, 4 years ago now. And that was the single biggest trigger I've probably ever experienced, or could ever actually put the word to it and go, actually, that is a trigger. And yeah, it then allowed me to think, right, if that's a trigger and I now know what the outcome of that is, let's look at my past and let's look at my future, and let's just look about what does that actually mean for me, and how do I view it.
Right. Wow, a big thinker.
Big thinker, yeah.
We
Got a lot of time on my hands.
Well, you know, like sometimes people say like, "Oh, you're too deep, Simon," or "You think too much," and I think, yeah, well, it cuts both ways. So, what do you want? Would you like me to be more shallow? And at the same time, I heard something yesterday on this, and I was thinking. People were talking about curiosity and being interested in other people's stories, and sometimes the person that's interested, the curious person, can become go too deep, ask too deep. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, maybe I am a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like I can do that on the podcast, right? Because we're here to go deep.
Yeah, of course.
But do I occasionally irritate people by being like on the podcast, but in the pub? So
yeah.
But you're a big thinker, but I also think you're a big feeler.
Big thinker, big feeler. My mum raised me to feel my emotions entirely, good or bad. It was never you mustn't cry, don't think, or be tough, or get angry. It was kind of just feel your emotions. So I've been allowed to do that, which has hugely benefited me. But like I say, in my childhood, I never had the word trigger in my vocabulary. It was never something that I felt the need. If you'd asked me 4 years ago, I'd have said there was no triggers. But now I'm looking back and going, actually, there were. But the key word for me is that I view them all as positive or meaningful or helpful now, rather than the emotions attached to them, which would be, feeling sad or fearful or such. I didn't have those emotions attached to them. I look back, an example might be I was bullied in school because of my color, and yes, it was sad, but I would apportion part of that more to because I was maybe excluded or not with my friends or not kind of included, rather than actually I didn't like that I was brown, or I didn't like that my country or that I was ashamed of my adoption. It was never really anything to do with that. It was more just that I wasn't included, and that just sucked, kind of thing. It brought me and my mum closer together because we would talk then, because she was obviously a big thinker as well. That opened up a dialogue to, yes, I guess it was a trigger, but it opened up a dialogue to, yes, you're brown, yes, I'm white, yes, this is your country, you should celebrate it, don't be ashamed of it. And that kind of connection with my mum was kind of, it just grew and grew from there, and I would view that as a helpful, positive trigger, because it born from that was something I could take away and look back on and go, actually, I take something from that experience.
Yeah. So it was the silver lining in the cloud.
Exactly that. Exactly that. I was allowed to feel the sadness that, yes, people didn't like the way I looked and my color, and people had a problem with that. But it wasn't the end of that. It was the end of that was kind of turning that, I guess, that negative thing into something more positive, like you say, the silver lining, making it more constructive. And looking back, I see all of that now as, I'm glad that happened. I learned something about myself. I learned something about my mum. I learned something about the whole situation.
Yeah. So I was bullied as well, but for different reasons. And bullying is always about difference, from what I can pretty much kind of. So I had teeth that stuck out, like, and so I got Bugs Bunny and all this sort of stuff. And interestingly, so I sought a solution to that, which was to have braces, right? But I never told my mum and dad about that, about the reason for it. I never told them about the bullying. So that was kind of one part of bullying, and then another part of bullying. So that was based on a physical thing, should we say, like your physical, your color, skin color.
Yeah.
But I was also bullied for I was bullied because I was the youngest kid in the tent in the scout camp.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to the youngest kid in the tent to a certain extent, right? You know, this is dog eat dog. This is
kids are horrible sometimes, aren't they? Just for whatever reason. Yeah.
I didn't see that at the time. And the main bully was the biggest kid in the tent. Right? So I'm not the most practical of guys. So he picked, whenever I made a mistake, which I've made quite a lot. I'm not a fast learner either. He made me sit. He made me kneel on the grass and say, "I am a stupid, worthless piece of," lots of swear words. That kind of really got to me. But I didn't tell my parents about that either. I just didn't go back to that scout group. But years later, I found out that that's the reason that I was bullied was because of that lad, and because of and he was struggling a lot, should we say. I'm pretty sure that he did to me what his dad did to him. Right? So it's kind of a learned thing. So people talk about the hurt people. People talk about the abused becomes the abuser. It kind of picked up on. But one of the biggest things that I've learned is that bullying is always about them. It's never actually about us.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah,
and that's far more profound than it really seems at the time. I did a lot of work in schools, and one of the things that I used to talk about was this, and I used to share my story, and we would be talking we'd be talking about it from a context of where our feelings come from. and they're an inside job.
Yeah, it's on us how we, what we feel and what we take from it. Yeah.
And yet we're raised in a world that thinks that there is such a thing as miserable weather, especially in the north of England, right?
Yeah,
south. Yeah.
Everyone down south's happy. Everyone up north is miserable.
Yeah, you know, like, but this whole idea that feelings are caused by the outside world is, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we have. Anyway, that's my stuff. So the reason I'm talking about, reason I'm kind of like riffing a bit here and bringing my stuff in here is that, listener, if you were bullied, listeners, if you were bullied when you were a kid because you were adopted, because you had different coloured skin to somebody else, just because you had different shaped teeth to somebody else, because you weren't very good at scout camp, whatever it was, because you had glasses, it wasn't about you. It was about the bully. And if you can kind of sit on that, and that can become that can become not a theory that you get in your head, but something you get in your guts, you know, in the depths of your soul, then that can, well, it was life-changing for me.
Yeah, from understanding that, once you can understand that, you grow from it then, don't you? You kind of just, all those feelings of it being about you suddenly disappear, and it's not about you at all. It's like, I guess it's very freeing, isn't it?
It's freeing, yeah.
All that negative, all that sadness just dissipates, and that you've been, I guess, suppressing yourself with for so long just goes.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not born with that left brain stuff.
Mm.
We're not born with that voice in our head that says we're not good enough.
Yep.
And we're not born with those feelings. Anyway, let's go back to your stuff, because this is
all very valid. All very, very valid. It's all comes into the big thinking stuff, doesn't it? Of looking back on those key moments, because that's what brings us to now, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. So what was the key moment? You talked about the key moment being the birth of your son, and that starting your search.
Yeah, sorry. So 4 years ago, well, I guess 5 years ago, we were having, me and my wife were having treatment, IVF, IUI, for our baby, and we knew there was that desire and want to be a parent, and that was the seed, I think, of this whole kind of snowball effect of what it is to be a parent. And then watching my wife carry our daughter, just nothing like it. I've never seen anything like it. I haven't got siblings, so I've not seen it with my own mum. I haven't got any siblings, so I haven't seen it with any of my other family members, really. So watching my wife do it was just something else. And the prospect of my birth mother obviously carrying me was kind of like, it just gradually got more and more. And then she arrived, and again, I'd never seen anything like it. Watching a baby come into this world was just like phenomenal. And there was that feeling of like, I know there's something missing. I know there's something here, but I can't quite put my finger on it. And I'm watching my daughter and I'm going, gosh, like, my birth mother will have at one point in her life seen me, held me, touched me. And there's somebody I need to there's something I need to do here. There's an action to here. It's something I can gloss over. And the picture became more and more clear what that was. And so, yeah, my next steps were kind of just delving into my documents, delving into pictures I had, understanding the finer detail around it. And I've always had access to that information. That's always been there. I've just never had that desire or want to do it in as much detail as I did. And that was kind of the start of the connection, I suppose, to my birth family. Without even knowing them, finding them, seeing them, I was already forming some kind of a relationship with them or some kind of connection to them. just through that information.
Yeah. So the big feeler stuff then. Your mum used to be a therapist, is that right? If I remember.
Yeah, she used to be a therapist. Yeah.
Used to be a therapist.
Well, in her later career, to be fair, she used to do welfare work with the police, military, that kind of stuff. So she's been a big community welfare background. Only in the last sort of 10 years of her career did she do therapy. Just curiosity, I think, from her perspective.
Yeah.
More than anything.
Yeah. So she and she raised you to feel, which is great, because so many of us are stuffing and numbing and obviously don't realize that we're doing that. And you're the first guy that has said about the birth of their child being a start of a catalyst for their own search. But so it seems. How long did it take? How long did the search?
The search.
How long did it take?
From the point at which I decided, I spent probably 2 months having discussions with somebody about my documents who knew about Peruvian documents, just to understand the story and get into the head of my mum and my birth mum about what have happened in logistically. I spent 2 months sort of doing that, and at the end of that, I'd gone too far down the rabbit hole to not search. So from that point, I then spent 3 months searching. So overall, it kind of consumed my life for about 5 months, which is nothing in comparative. Very, very quick. Wasn't really prepared for that. I was kind of expecting it to be difficult, really, really difficult. And in the moment, yeah, it was like every day was a long day, but actually, yeah, comparatively really quick.
Yeah. So when did so is that 5 to getting her name, or is that to meeting her? What?
It was, so the first 2 months were the documents bit. Yeah. So I had my documents for, well, I had names of my birth parents. I was given tools and ways at which to access my original adoption information and all of that. So I was putting all the pieces and the paperwork together for sort of 2 months. And then 3 months was kind of just like, I've come to the end of that, and I now need to start typing those words into Google and going on weird and wonderful websites to kind of see if there was a way to them. And that was probably the hardest, because there really wasn't. You couldn't just type their name and it popped up. It wasn't really that straightforward. But in the end, I just searched. I contacted somebody who had some of the names that were in that on the certificate. And if you know South America or Latin countries, they love big long names, and they all change their names depending on who they marry, and it becomes very complicated. So I kind of had a few names out of the big long list. I thought I'll just message someone with those names, see what happens.
But presumably, you're Carlos Munez. Does this mean that your adopted parents didn't change your name?
So without getting into it, I have my adoptive parents kept one of my middle names and then changed my first name. I have different name now for a different reason.
Right. Okay.
But they to be fair to them, they kept my middle name in with a view to kind of keeping that connection to what I was given. But yeah, no, my parents in Peru have different names, as do my siblings. So it was kind of a bit of a gamble, but needle in a haystack, trying to find someone with one of the names that were the same.
Yeah. And so was the first connection on the phone, or on Zoom, or on face to face? When did you first?
So it was Facebook. There was 2 profiles. Both of them had one of the last names that I had on a certificate. And I thought, well, maybe it'd be a long distant cousin, or maybe it'd just be nothing. But there's no harm now. I've come to the end almost of my options. I need to be a little bit brave and just reach out to people now and start asking. There was one guy, one girl, and I reached out to the guy and thought, see what he has to say. And yeah, in a nutshell, he was my brother. So it was as simple as that. And the other lady was my sister, which would have been even more ironic if I'd reached out to her. Would have come to the same place.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, really, really lucky.
Right. And you're still in touch? It's gone. How's it been? How's the reunion been?
It's just been another. It's been what? How many years now? 3, 4 years. 2020, so 3 years. In October, actually, so 3 years. It's been a long run of learning about myself, creating happy memories, triggers in the most positive of ways. Almost now, I'm triggered in a sense of a call for action, justice. I see the life they live, and have a huge amount of compassion for them, for what they've experienced as a family. Obviously, before they met me, that I'm very much part of their family. They view me as just one of their gang, and there's 18 of them, so there's a big family. They all live collectively together, and it's a really lovely thing to have. Really lovely to have them sort of, obviously not here. Or every day somebody messages me, so they're always in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's I've not had siblings before, so getting to grips with what it's like to have siblings. You can share information, you can share how you feel, you can talk about your worries, you can talk about your kids. So having people like that to do, doesn't matter where you are in the world, they've all got the same problems. We've got a lot in common, actually. So yeah, lovely. Really, just couldn't have asked for any more from them.
Yeah. So you're learning Spanish as well?
I spent about 4 months learning Spanish. I know enough to get by, but they speak quite fast over there.
Yeah.
We went the year, about just over a year after I found them, we went to Peru to meet them in Peru, and they don't speak any English at all. So it was very much like hand gestures and just trying to work it out. But they gave me everything they could possibly give me in that experience. And they haven't got a lot to give, but they gave me everything I could have asked for as a memory, as an experience. And the language was just not an issue. It was just kind of like watching my daughter play with her cousins was kind of just no problem at all. They managed, and we managed.
Yeah.
So
we're not born with language.
no, very good point. Very good point. It would. I look back and people have asked me that question before, and I kind of thought, God, how did we get by? But it just did. It wasn't even a thought. Even it was a. There was hugs. There was arms around each other. There was kind of gesturing to sit here, or we played volleyball. So they were playing games in the fields. We went out to see the crops. So they were showing me what crops were. I mean, we all knew certain words. So like I knew what corn was or what potatoes were. So they were showing me what they'd grown in their land, their animals they had. So I knew like what an animal was in a different language. It's the sentencing stuff and the emotions and feelings. So we had a translator come for about an hour just to answer the questions that obviously I couldn't ask. And out of that was kind of nothing more than I already knew. The stuff she had to say that I already knew she felt, but she wanted to say it to me. But I knew that she felt like she wished she hadn't. And I knew she felt that it was a hard decision and that she's always thought about me, and it was just an awful time. I knew all of that, but she kind of felt she needed to sort of say it. It'd be translated to me, so I fully understood it. So yeah, it was not. It was a really great experience. I'm glad we took pictures because looking back, I don't think it felt like a dream. Like, did that just happen kind of moment? But we've got whole sorts of pictures and videos that we look back on and go, gosh, that was just an amazing experience.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So before we hit the record button, you said something about you listening to one of the podcasts that I've done on triggers.
Yes. Yeah. That was your trigger. You mentioned about the weather and what mood you're in, and the kind of your take on which mood you want to be. And that's kind of how my view was kind of, we all think triggers are kind of negative, but if you kind of take it however you want to take it, it could be something positive. It could be something with a good outcome. And that, yeah, just got me thinking more about obviously this monumental trigger of having my own child was kind of huge, and it allowed me to look back and think about other things that probably were triggers, but I'm quite grateful for those triggers because it all led me to this point. But some of the stuff you were talking about kind of made me think about the future of, yeah, I actually am still being triggered, but I'm being triggered in a sunny way. So I look at my brother and my sister and I think I want to help them, or I want to show them or teach them something, because they do equally the same for me. They teach me things all the time about myself. So we've obviously set up a family business, I think I might have mentioned.
Yeah,
that's kind of the whole kind of, if they didn't trigger me, I wouldn't do it. But their emotions and the way that they are as people, it somehow triggers me because I want to do something for them. And I guess I wouldn't have thought of that as a trigger many moons ago, but now I look at it and I think I could quite happily sit here and just not answer their messages, not worry about them, not think about them, but I do worry about them and I do think about them. And it gets me right in my heart sometimes when some of the situations I find that they're in, I feel compelled to do something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think triggers are used. I was talking about somebody else about this on the podcast last week, I think. The word triggered, it's really overused. It's a word like trauma, like, I couldn't find my car in the car park, or I lost a pound, or I lost my trolley, and I was triggered, like it's kind of become triggered, and trauma and stuff like that have become really words that don't have any meaning because they're just used all the time. It's like, what is it? The crying wolf, when you hear that expression, when people are crying wolf. And it's the one I think about with this is as a kid growing up, you got some teachers that are angry all the time and stern all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, it just becomes nothing. But then you've got the other guys or girls who are great most of the time, and then they lose it. And when they lose it, it's got real impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's got a real impact, and you sit up and notice. Whereas the other way, it's just off a duck's back in it, and I can think of some friends, and one of them going on about all the time, and it's just water off the other guy's back.
There are insignificant things in life that definitely haven't earned the word almost trigger. It's just life. But
so
there are
what sound, as you were talking, I was thinking about another word for triggers to separate it off from the kind of the negative stuff that we're talking about, emotional triggers, and trigger warning, on Facebook posts in adoptee groups, and like it's a call to action, isn't it? It's a call to action. It's a call to arms. It's a stimulus. It's a prompt.
It comes from different emotions, not fear or sadness, but it might come from happiness, or it comes from a desire to kind of help. It comes from just something different. It's not sadness. It's most certainly not trauma. It comes from somewhere else.
It comes from somewhere else. Yeah, like a catalyst.
Yeah.
Catalyst. I think one of the mentors, past mentor of mine, used to listen to a lot, buy programs off him and buy his books and listen to him. Now I just kind of listen to his old podcast. His business is called Genius Catalyst. So like he's catalyzing genius, and he's the guy that came up. He had a diamond in horse manure. That was one of his metaphors. A diamond that's lost in horse manure So that was the diamond lost in the fist for the trauma kind of stuff. But, yeah, so a catalyst for our change.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you see any way that what's your take on kind of stuff that people might perceive as a negative trigger? So like an adoptee who said, I saw something on television about an adoptee story, and it was very triggering. It was very triggering for me, and it made me relive my insecurities or brought up my trauma or whatever. So what's your take on that?
I'll probably give you an example. Actually, quite recently, we all in England, obviously we have Long Lost Families, don't we? The TV program,
Yeah.
and that, I guess, for lots of adoptees is kind of a kind of a go-to trigger thing. I watched something else. It wasn't that. I watched something else, and the way it was done, obviously, was quite different to Long Lost Families. So it was about genealogy and DNA and stuff. So I was watching it, and it was about an interracial or a transracial adoption. So that made it a bit more personal, shall we say. And it was an incredibly sad story, very, very sad story. And it really got me in the feels. I was literally like bawling up in my eyes about it. But it wasn't because it was sad in the sense of, gosh, that poor person, and that's a really awful traumatic experience. Yes, it was the experience for those people. Yes, it was traumatic in their lives, but it wasn't traumatic to me. It was just sad to see the outcome of their story. But all the feelings and all the emotions of relating to it. So it was all about, like you said before, a call to action. So I was getting emotional because the outcome of their sad story was actually, they felt a call to action, something they were going to do at the end of the summary of their sad story, if you want to call it that, was actually something they'd done with that, made it, they had this positive view of it. They were going to go and do something that was going to change the world. It was going to change their world. It was going to change their perception of their adoption. And I looked at that and I thought, God, I'm in admiration. I'm getting emotional because I'm thinking, gosh, that is so beautiful what you're going to do. But some people might have viewed that, I guess, and looked at their story and gone, that trauma that those people have gone through is just shocking, and it's trying to trigger me. And it didn't trigger me. It didn't make me feel about anything bad about myself. It made me feel love about my own story. It made me feel happy that I'd got to where I wanted to be with my story. Yeah, I know everybody's not that lucky, and I know everybody has a different experience. But for me, it most certainly didn't make me feel watching someone else's story, which some people would argue was traumatic and triggering, didn't make me feel like I needed to go and sit in a dark room somewhere and, process. It made me feel like, gosh, I'm inspired almost.
So these were kind of more like tears of joy, were they?
Yeah, one for a better word. Yeah, tears of joy, because in that moment, I was feeling love. I was feeling love for my birth mother family. I was feeling love for my own mum. I was feeling love for the people on the TV, and they're watching their story and understanding, I guess, what they would have gone through. But real joy that they'd come out the other side and they were going to really grasp life after that ordeal and do something positive with it. It was tears of joy, I guess, is the only way to summarize it. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people talk, this isn't in the adoptee space. I wouldn't say I've come across this, but people, well, this guy, Michael Neal, the guy who had the Genius Catalyst, or has the Genius Catalyst business, is a coach, author kind of guy, speaker. And that people in that world talk about feelings being assigned to us that that our thoughts are going off track, right? So his metaphor is a rumble strip. Yeah, so rumble strips by the side of the road are there, so that if we fall asleep at the wheel and we drift off, when we hit the rumble strips, that noise is an alert to get us back onto the track, so we don't hit the crash barrier or go over the side of the hill or whatever it is, leave the road. So feelings, feeling bad is a sign that our thoughts have gone south. Obviously, we're not aware of those thoughts, right? But the feelings are more visceral than thoughts. So feelings are there to keep us safe, in the same way as if we hurt, another metaphor, like if we put our hand on the hob, on the oven top, and like the heat's there to tell us to take out. So it's a warning sign. It's a warning sign. And once we've got to that place, then it's pointing us back to it's kind of like pointing us back to our wisdom. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah.
So life is about actually going out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because most of the feelings that we're feeling aren't about our physical danger.
Yeah.
It isn't a rumble strip. It's just a feeling of nervousness. It's a sign. A guy I used to listen to, I used to say, well, that feeling of fear is a sign that we're going to learn something new.
Yeah, no, I like that. Absolutely.
And we're stepping into a higher version, more conscious version of ourselves. So with so many of us are, and this is, I mean me, right? I've been worried about being worried. So I've stuffed stuff down, whereas you were brought up not to worry.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are definitely things in my life I worry about. But when it comes to my adoption, I'm fortunate enough that I've kind of come full circle, because that feeling of the missing bit when I, was watching my daughter come into the world, and then obviously finding my birth family, and then I'm getting fulfillment from that. There's no feelings I want to push down. I'm happy to feel them, the good, the sad, the stuff that makes me have a call to action, all of that. I'm open to that. I'm happy to be put in my stretch zone to kind of feel that and see where it takes me. It's quite exciting to think where it's going to take us and our relationship, as it grows with my birth family.
Yeah. So how else could that feeling of missing, what else could that, if you turn a different way, what could that feeling of missing something have led you to?
I think it was very clear, to be honest, because it was all about children, babies being born and birth. I think there was, well, let's say 9 months of my wife being pregnant. There was 9 months of that kind of unknown. What is this missing? And I think I probably searched in myself of, is it that I'm content in myself? It was never about other people. It was maybe more me thinking it was more about me. So am I content in my own confidence, where I'm going with my future, my abilities? Maybe more of that was a kind of a missing of, am I missing something in myself that's going to make me a good enough father? That kind of avenue. When I realized really, it was obviously partly about me, but it was more about where I'd come from, and that missing was actually a person and not really me. Then that's obviously when it pointed in the right direction. But yeah, if it was to go in a different direction, it would probably be me looking in at myself, and I probably would have ended up coming back to the original of it's a person, it's not me.
Yeah. Did I tell you about the tears running down my face that washed away the fear towards my birth mother? Did I tell you about that?
No, go on.
Yeah.
Curious.
So I had a meltdown in a therapist chair about 8 years ago, I think it was, and that reignited the search for my birth mother, because I wasn't prepared to live with that fear.
Mm-hmm.
I just like to tackle. I gotta tackle this head on. I'm not going to let this fear of what I would call, like a fear of rejection.
Okay.
I wasn't going to let that. That took me to a place where I got my file, and I reasoned. I realized without any doubt that she never rejected me in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And the tears washed down my face and washed away that that belief. And and then when I used to watch that Long Lost Families every now and again around that time.
Yeah.
When I saw the birth mother's love for their kid.
Yeah.
That just had me in tears of joy again, because it was a trigger, right? It was a stimulus. It reminded me
mm-hmm.
of the moment when I read the letter.
Yeah. It's the realization, isn't it, that somebody out there loves you, or maybe didn't want to do that, but yeah, it's not necessarily rejection. It might not be rejection.
No, the one. It was never about rejection. And I'm listening to a book at the moment by a neuroscientist, called something Bolt Taylor. She had a stroke, and she lost her left brain.
Okay.
She lost all the activity of the left brain. The left brain is where the judgment is. Judgment lives in the left brain. And it doesn't start, that left brain doesn't kick in until we're 2. Doesn't start forming until we're 2. Right? So how old were you when you were adopted?
I came back to England when I was 8 months old.
8 months old, right? Yeah. So I was 5 weeks old, right? So the judgment, like the judgment of the rejection, or the thought, the self judgment, and all that sort. That part of the brain doesn't even start forming till we're 2. So it's in our brains. It's in our brains, and it's not in our brains. Well, for you and me, it wasn't in our brains when we were adopted, because the left-hand brain wasn't.
Mm.
Does that kind of? It's the first time I'm waffling a little bit, because it's the first time I've consciously kind of put that thought together.
Yeah.
2 things together. I put together I've listened to what the woman said, and then I've now applied it to our adoptee experience.
Yes.
And I've got an answer for a question that's been bugging me for a while. And I've got a neuroscientist expert, right? So this isn't. I'm just using her. I'm using her truth.
Yes.
I don't know that stuff. She does, right? And this is what she said, because she's a neuroscientist. So what the bit that's been bothering me, or the question that's been bothering me that I want an answer to, is how can a feeling of being relinquished become a belief that we're not good enough?
Yeah.
Well, well, it doesn't. The answer is it doesn't.
No,
because the feeling of relinquishment it happens on that at that point, at which we're relinquished, and then it's years later that the left brain cuts, and the left brain is looking for a reason.
Yeah.
It's the meaning maker. It's the judgment.
It's what are you listening to in the environment, and what are you listening to? Are you listening to yourself? You're listening to people outside of you, in your family, people in your school. That word rejection was never used in my childhood. So like that word never even crossed my mind growing up. To be honest, it was never.
I think it can become an internal I think it can from it can come from internal pontification.
Yeah.
And I think it can, and it can from external, right? So I could, for me, I could put those together, right? I could tell you, I told you about the scout, the kid in the scout camp telling me that I was a useless piece of effing S, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can put that, and I can stack the not good enough stuff. I've got some external. I've got some external seeds of some external seeds of low self-esteem, whatever, weakness of identity. I've got some internal stuff, and I've got some external stuff, and I've got all the business stuff as well that I can trot out. I wasn't good enough at business, and I've got all that story.
Yes,
that story. So that neuroscientist woman, when she had the stroke, she lost her whole story, her story of her, the story of her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm just looking at my phone to give, I think it's, Jill Bolte Taylor. I'll put a link in the show notes, because I know that people are often driving when they listen to podcasts, or walking the dog, and they ain't got access to her. Yeah, Jill Bolte Taylor. Yeah.
Really interesting.
So I guess we're urging people to take a look at their own, make their own mind out about triggers, because the thing that was popping into my head is, an old mentor of mine used to say, when we're moved, right, emotionally moved, we move. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is the kind of catalyst. This is a call to action, and energy, or the other one is looking at like energy, emotion, energy in motion. And did a podcast yesterday with a birth mother, Dolores Sullivan, and she talked about the most healing thing for her was when she, when there was a meaning, a meaning to her suffering, to the stuff that she'd been through, the shame that they'd poured on her.
Yeah.
In the 60s, when she relinquished, and when she became an advocate, when she turned her anger, when she plugged into her anger to advocate, to become an advocate, whilst keeping the anger at bay, so that, because if we try to influence other people,
it's funny
when we're angry, then they're gonna listen to us.
Yeah, my birth mother doesn't read or write, but she's very much in touch, I think, with her feelings. She's a very thoughtful lady, and my search and finding her, she will, as that lady you just mentioned there, of that relinquishment of, she felt like she lost two children after I was given up for adoption. She lost two children when they were quite young for accidents, and she often thought that she was being punished in some way for the decision that she made. But since finding her, it's allowed her to think differently about it, because I'm a very firm believer of that relinquishment, that decision that she made, saved my life. I've had ill health and other things that if I was born there and raised there and hadn't been adopted, I probably wouldn't have survived. I wouldn't be here. So her understanding and knowing that has turned her thoughts and beliefs entirely on its head. And she now, she looks at things very, very differently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a perfect example of that left brain inner judgment thing, So as you said it, I was thinking about, like a religious take on that. This is God has done this to you as a judgment, and a kind of Old Testament kind of.
Yeah. Well, she's from well, Peru is a Catholic country. They have an element of religion. I wouldn't say they're true Catholics as such, but they have a Christian religion, and God, she felt God would punish her in some way. Correct? Yeah. So, it's the impact is forever keeps having an impact on not just me, my family, but them too, and a good one.
Yeah. Conscious of time, is there anything you'd like to talk about, Carlos, or that I haven't given you a chance to address?
No, I think we've come full circle almost on the whole thing. I look at my life now. I'm quite content in where I am with it. I see a lot of challenges in the future, with things that I want to do, but I'm quite open to those challenges. I'm quite keen to make the best I can out of the situation that I'm in. So I'm feeling quite good about the future, which is a nice place to be.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Thank you, listeners. We'll speak to you again very soon. Take care. Bye.